This is Algebra 1, Semester 1. It's the first unit called Equations. It's the third lesson called Properties of Math. It's on creatormath.com under the Algebra 1 tab. You might have to Google creatormath.weebly.com to find the site. The instructions are copy the following problems into your composition book. It says 1 through 10 here. Usually when I write that on these, this one goes, nope, I'm going to take that out. It's actually more than that, so ignore that. Copy the following problems into your composition book on the correct pages according to the table of contents with notes for those pages from creatormath.com. So usually what I try to do is model for you finding the notes, since that can be hard for students. So let's go back here. Let's back up a little bit. This is the website, creatormath.weebly.com. That's where you're going to Google and find this home page, I hope. There you go. Everything for your composition book is on this home page. Scroll down until you see in large letters, composition book. Follow the directions, watch the videos, and follow the turn-in dates for the composition book with all the instructions. You should have a 90 to 100% on that comp book, helping your grade and helping you figure out how to do some of these problem sets. All right, so as we now clicked into the Algebra 1 tab, that's where the videos are, the problem sets, and the notes, and of course, vocabulary. Make sure you understand that there is a full vocabulary Algebra 1 practice study PDF here. You can open it up, download it to your computer, and it is searchable. Google, how do I search a PDF? On the device you're on, it's different for different devices. You should be getting 100% on your vocabulary practices. Now I'm scrolling down to the proper semester. In this case, this video I'm making is Semester 1. This is Algebra 1 Table of Contents. You should have already copied this entire table of contents on the pages 2 through 6 of your composition book for the correct semester. I'm going to scroll down to the first unit here, which is Equations. We're on lesson number 3 right here, Properties of Math. Here are the page numbers it goes on in your comp book. Please don't use this video for the page numbers, but go to the original table of contents on the website, because by the time you watch this video, this probably will be changed. All right? We're going to click Notes. There's also problems, and the video solution will be here too. Sometimes I have to load the notes twice to get them to open. There was once. It should be able to expand so you can see everything clearly, and you're going to copy these properties of math into your composition book. There's Commutative Property of Addition. Notice that you can switch the 2 and the 3. 2 plus 3 equals 3 plus 2. They both equal 5. These are fundamental properties you probably have been studying for quite some time in your life. Well, go back and do them again, and this lesson's going to be on these. The commutative property of multiplication is the same thing, but with multiplication. 2 times 3 is 6, and 3 times 2 is 6. Okay? The associative property of addition means we can group different groups as long as they're all being added. This will still give us the same result, right? Notice the parentheses around the 8 plus 5 here and the parentheses around the 1 plus 8 here. You're still going to get, they will still be equal to each other. The associative property of multiplication means you can switch the order of multiplying. 2 times 3 times 4 is the same as 4 times 3 times 2. Okay? And you can group them with parentheses, and to have people, they would multiply the 3 times 4 first, then by 2, or multiply the 2 times 3 first, then by 4. You're going to get the same result. Okay. Distributive property is where you have a value outside of a set of parentheses, and you multiply that value outside across all the terms in the parentheses to get a distribution. The opposite of distributive property is factoring, and that's a repeated multiplication process, and factoring is a repeated division process. We have the additive identity. What do you add to a number to leave it the same? 0. We have the additive inverse. What do you add to a number to get 0? It's inverse, whether it be a 5 plus a negative 5 or a negative 5 plus a positive 5. And we're going to refer back to these notes as we do the problem sets. The multiplicative identity property is when you multiply by 1 and you get its identity. 8 times 1 is 8. That's what we started with, and that's what we got. This applies in the case of multiplying by 1, which can also be a fraction. 8 over 8 is 1. X over x is 1. And radical 2 over radical 2 is 1. And this, of course, is referring to rationalizing the denominator, which we'll cover later. And just sort of a teaser here on, so wow, that looks kind of interesting. If we multiply something by 1, a fraction where the number on top and the number in the numerator and denominator are the same, that equals 1 also, except in the case of 0 over 0. The multiplicative inverse is where we multiply by the reciprocal of something. 8 over 1 times 1 over 8 gives us 1. And in this case, let's see, 8 over 8, yes, is 1. Recitals, parentheses is the most important. Inverse, we can reverse a sign, like 5 and -5. Copy all these notes in your comp book, and that is going to help you do this problem set, especially in this case. All right, the commutative property of addition. Notice they only give us 2 answer choices, you guys. So this is more of one of those practices where it's really not a quiz or a test. It's helping you sort of figure things out. Well, let's look. Commutative property of addition. Is this addition? No, this is times. I already know that one's out. I already know this is the right answer, okay? They're telling us what the right answer is. And now you're going to go back and review what is the commutative property of addition. It's when we add 2 numbers in reverse order, we still get the same answer. Fair enough? Let's look at this one. 2 plus 3 and 3 plus 2. This is not the commutative property of multiplication. It has to be addition because notice it's dealing with addition and not multiplication. I appreciate them making this more of a practice set for us than, testing us or making it hard. It's going to be easy, but it's going to help us remember. Commutative property of multiplication, well, this one's multiply. This one's add and subtract. It's out. So it's this one. And if we have the commutative property of multiplication, 2 times 3 and 3 times 2, we're just matching it up. It's got to be multiplication. It's not addition, right? So it's got to be that answer. I see where we're headed with this, and I appreciate them doing it. All right, here we're grouping different things. So the associative property of addition. So we're not going to circle the one that's got multiplication in it, right? We're going to circle the one that's got addition in it. That's going to be our correct answer. And if we have one with addition, it's going to be the associative property of addition. Just a practice set to get you to try to focus a little bit more on what we're talking about. None of these are complicated situations. They're just reiterating for us what we learn in the notes. 2 times 3 times 4 is 4 times 3 times 5 times 2. It's one is in one order, one is in reverse order. This is the associative property of multiplication. Can't be this one because it's dealing with addition. And if they give us one with multiplication, it's got to be the associative property of multiplication. Distributive property. So we start with a value outside of a set of terms inside of a parentheses, and we're going to multiply across that. So A times B and A times C. This is distributive property. If they give us distributive, we need to know the name is distributive property. The additive identity property is what can you add to a number and stick with the same number? Well, if you add 0 to a number, you're going to stick with 5. So you start with 5, add 0, you end with 5. This is the additive identity. See additive? Don't pick something with a multiplication in it if it says additive, right? So they're being very obvious to us. Now they're giving us additive identity property and asking us to name it. And they're not even mixing up these problems. They're giving them straight in order. They're not even randomly generated, I don't think. I think these go straight through exactly like this. The additive inverse property. What can you add to reverse this back to 0? Well, if it's 5, you add a -5. If it's -5, you add a 5, and you end up back at 0. That's what the additive inverse. Inverse is, if you have a 5, -5 is the inverse of that. And if you have a -5, +5 is the inverse of that. This has a multiplication in it, so it's out. And they only gave us one mislead here. Pick the correct one, ignore the mislead. All right, now if you have the additive inverse, right, so -5 is the inverse of 5, we get 0, then we just have to identify the name of this thing, the additive inverse property. Multiplicative identity, what do you multiply by to get the identity? Well, 1. So anything you multiply by 1, you're going to get its identity. You started with 8, you multiplied it by something, you ended with 8, because 8 times 1 is 8. So, and it's multiply. Notice this is being added down here, so that's out. If you're given multiplicative identity, then we're just going to name it. A multiplicative identity. And practice saying those words because they can be quite complicated. The multiplicative inverse, what do you multiply 8 by? To go back to 1, it's got to be its reciprocal. Remember, if you have 8 over 1 and you flip it, the reciprocal is 1 over 8. If you have 1 over 8 and you take the reciprocal, you flip it, you get 8 over 1. That's the idea of a reciprocal. and we say flipping a fraction, right? Flipping. It's hard for students. They say, how do you flip 8? Well, it's 8 over 1, so if you flip it, it's 1 over 8, right? That's a little bit hard for students to do, but you guys can figure it out, all right? So multiplicative inverse property is multiply by 1/8, and if you had 1/8, you'd multiply by 8 over 1. This is not the multiplicative because it's added, right? Just look at the operation involved. This is addition. They're talking about multiplication. Here we have here, they're giving it to us, so we just have to name it as the multiplicative inverse property. All right, get rid of distributive. That's a mislead. So make sure you're matching up the name of this video with the name of the practice set you're doing of problems so that you can get things right. This is Algebra 1, Semester 1. It's the first unit called Equations, and it's the third lesson called Properties of Math, and it's on creatormath.com under the Algebra 1 tab. Hope this helps.